What are you going to get out of the Music Labs theory course? Well, I'm going to give a quick overview on what I hope for you by the time you're done this course. And I think the biggest takeaway is to be able to play with other musicians and jam with them in any musical key you want and have an understanding of what you're doing and why you're doing it. I truly think that will help advance your guitar playing, especially if you're feeling stuck. Now, this course is from absolute beginners, like if you've never even picked up a guitar before, this will work. If you are an intermediate or advanced and maybe you've just never learned theory, but you've got all the techniques down, this is going to help you. Well, I sure hope it will. All right, so let's just get to it. The first thing to understand is that most Western music is based off the major scale. And most theory is based off that major scale itself. All other scales and all other keys are built from that major scale. Let me show you what I mean. The major scale is simply a set of notes, 7 of them, that have a certain interval between those notes. It just follows a pattern. That pattern you may have heard of as whole step, half step, whole step, half step. Now, I've probably already lost half of you, but hang in there. I'm going to give you an easier way. Forget that pattern. The way I like to do it in my brain, maybe you want to learn whole step, half step, blah, blah, blah. Or you can just write out numbers, 1 to 7. 1, 2. Now notice I'm going to put 3 and 4 right beside each other. 5, 6, and now I'm going to put 7 and 1 together. And then it repeats. 2, 3. Now in between 1 and 2, there's space. In between 2 and 3, space. Notice, no space. So I'm just going to continue marking the spaces where we have space. I'm going to just get rid of that part. It's really not needed right now. Okay, we have our major scale pattern. Now, why do we have a space in here? Well, I'll get there in a second. Right below the 1, I'm going to put the C. The C underneath the 1, or the C as the 1, that depicts the name of the key or the scale that you're in. So we're going to do the C major scale. Okay, now I'm just going to go through the alphabet and put a letter under each number as I go. So D, E and F are together, G, A, and then B and C are together. All other intervals have a space. Why is there a space between them? Well, that's the whole step, half step I was talking about earlier. So between 1 and 2 is what they call a whole step. Halfway between 1 and 2 is a half step. Okay? So it stands to reason that between 1 and 2 is a whole step, 2 and 3 is a whole step, 3 and 4 is a half step, whole step, half step. So we have a list. We have a whole step, we have a half step list. And that list is 3 and 4 and 7 and 1. If you want to think in scale intervals, which I like to do, then just remember the numbers, 3 and 4 and 7 and 1. If you want to think in letters, then you have to think in E and F and B and C. Or you could just memorize them all. It's not hard. It's only 4 things. So how does that relate to the guitar? What is a whole step on the guitar? Well, it's really easy. It's just 2 frets. And what's a half step on the guitar? It's 1 fret. So it's not hard. So between C and D should be 2 frets. Between D and E should be 2 frets. And between E and F, 1 fret. Let's take a quick peek at the infinite fretboard escalator that I built here, and we can see between C and D, there are 2 frets. Between D and E, there are 2 frets. Between E and F, there's only 1. Okay, so you're going to see that a lot better because right now that video looks a little bit dark, but when I start placing pins in there, you're going to understand a lot better. So let's build the C major scale on the fretboard escalator. If you don't have a fretboard escalator, write in the comments fretboard escalator and I'll message you and show you how you can get yourself one. But if you don't have one for now, you could just draw this out on a piece of paper. It works the same. You could draw a line, draw out these letters, or just watch. Because honestly, just watching makes a big difference. Just watch the video through and then go back and maybe draw it out on a piece of paper after. So we know that C is our 1. So I'm going to need a pin at C. Now, between 1 and 2 is a whole step. That's 2 frets. So 1, 2 frets. And that lines up with the D. All right, things are working out so far. Another whole step to 3 gets me to E. A half step gets me to F. And then another whole step gets me to G. And then another whole step gets me to A. One more whole step gets me to B. And a half step gets me to C. So now we have the entire major scale on a guitar fretboard, and we understand what a whole step is, a whole step, and a half step. So you could actually stop the video right now, go grab your guitar, and if you don't know where the C note is, just count the dots from the left, and you'll figure out exactly where the C note is. Start at the C and just play these intervals down the neck, and you'll play. You'll have played the C major scale. Okay, that's great. But what if we wanted to change keys, you ask? Okay, so grab your circle of fifths dial. If you don't have a circle of fifths dial, write circle of fifths dial in the comments, and I'll let you know how to get one. If you can grab a circle of fifths off the internet, you'll be able to do this yourself as well. The circle of fifths, I'm not going to go into how it works in this video, but later on we'll get to it. If I had C as my 1 chord, just like we talked about over here, C is 1, C, D, E, F, G, and A, that's what we've got, with no sharps and no flats, and we've got no sharps and no flats to follow that pattern. No sharps and no flats on our fretboard escalator. But let's say we're going to change the key of G. The key of G has 1 sharp. That sharp is F sharp, according to this. Let's check it. We're going to build that from scratch. Now again, don't worry. Don't get upset that this is complicated, because you're not going to do this every day. All we're doing this for is to give you that basic understanding of why. And once you know the why, you're not going to sit and build these keys out ever again. But at least you'll understand when we talk about, now you'll know what a scale interval is. That's between a 1 and a 2. Now you'll know what a whole step and a half step is. So you're getting there. Okay, now we're going to do G major. G major. It's a really good A. Okay. So rule number 1, when we want to create a G major scale, where do we put the G? We put the G under the 1. Okay, so first we're going to do up top, and then we're going to put it on the fretboard escalator. So we know that to follow this pattern between 1 and 2 is a whole step. So we need a whole step, and between G and A is a whole step. So the next letter over from G is A. Perfect. Now between 2 and 3, we're going to do this. We've got another whole step. All right, a whole step away from A is B. So let's whole step to B. Now 3 to 4 is a half step. So let's go a half step over from B. Oh, that's C. So things are working out pretty easy. So that's C. Now 4 to 5 is a whole step. Okay, now we're at C, but we've got to start back over here because we didn't repeat the scale. So from C to D is a half step, a whole step, right? So we're going 4 to 5. We need a whole step from C. That gets us to D. So I'm going to whole step to D. Those things are pretty easy. They're actually lining up right now so far. So 5 to 6, we need another whole step. So D to E is a whole step. Okay, so things are good. So whole step away from D is E. So whole step away from D is E. Now from 6 to 7, we have another whole step. Okay, so we need to go a whole step away from E. A whole step away from E, oh, we got trouble here. So we have to skip over this F because that's only a half step away, and we got to sit in between here. Well, what's between F and G? Well, it's F sharp or G flat. Now, for this one, we're going to call it F sharp. So we've got a whole step from 6 to 7. So we're going to whole step from E, whole step from E gets us to F sharp in this little space here. So I'm going to put F sharp. That's terrible writing, but I'm trying not to smudge. Okay, so now we need a half step from 7 to 1. So we're on F sharp right in here, and a half step from F sharp is G. Okay, so if we look at this pattern now, we've got G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, and then G. So this has 1 sharp, and that sharp is F sharp. Let's get our circle of fifths dial and check our work. F sharp, boom. Nailed it. So now you can continue on. You can go through D, and you'll find the same result, except you'll have two sharps, F sharp and C sharp. But before we do that, what I'm going to do is now show you on the fretboard escalator. Because what happens, all we're doing is, you can see up here, is shifting everything down. So if we took this whole pattern, lifted it up, and shifted it down to G, you would see that we would end up with an F sharp. So let's try that. Let's put our money where our mouth is. What a ridiculous saying that is. We're always taught not to put money in your mouth. Starting at G, we need a whole step. Now I'm not going to look up that. Well, I should, just for your sake. So from 1 to 2 is a whole step. Okay, so that gets us to A. From 2 to 3 is another whole step. From 3 to 4 is a half step. 4 to 5 is a whole step. 5 to 6 is a whole step. 6 to 7 is another whole step. And 7 to 1 is a half step. Now hopefully you can still see that on the board. So what we have is G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp. Well, I covered that up. I'm going to try and do that again. So we've got G, A, B, C, D, E, and F sharp. And then back to G. So if you ever wondered how that works, you're just shifting all those notes down, and that makes one of them sharp in order to maintain that pattern that we set out at the very beginning. So your homework is, try and do this on a piece of paper, because you can do all this on paper. You don't need the fretboard escalator, but you can grab yourself a circle of fifths off the internet, and it'll depict to you how many sharps, or just Google how many sharps or flats are in a key, and do A next, or D. See if you can come up with 3 sharps in the key of A major. They should be F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. If I were to take that same interval set, that same pattern, and start at A way over here, I would end up with those sharps. Easy, right? So again, you don't have to do this every day. What you have to understand is where it comes from. And now you do. So you can move on and get to the fun stuff. You know what a key is. You know what a scale is. You know what a half step and a whole step are. You know why a key has a sharp in it and why it might have multiple sharps in it. So there you go. You learned something. All right, something I forgot to mention in the last video, so I just want to stick this in. This is quite important. We discussed about whole steps and half steps. Whole step 2 frets, half step 1 fret. We also discussed about sharps and flats. In between here can be a C sharp or a D flat. In between here could be a D sharp or an E flat. The same goes true for the scale interval numbers. In between 1 and 2, we call this a flat 2, or we call this a flat 3. That would be a flat 5. And of course, this is a flat 6, and so on. We have a flat 7. This is really important to understand the naming convention behind this. The reason is because eventually we're going to fill out a full fretboard escalator, or you can do it with paper and pencil later on in the lessons. And what you can see here is these are all scale intervals for the major scale. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You recognize just like we did earlier in the other video. But sometimes we're going to need to flatten some notes. We'll get there. Don't worry about it. But all you need to do, all your takeaway has to be, is that in between, on these half steps between C and D, we've got a C sharp, or between 1 and 2, we have a flat 2. That's it. Just remember that for next time. So I hope you found that video useful. I'm going to keep posting more videos. This is lesson 1.0. So as I realize more things that I might have forgotten or should have added, I'm going to create videos called 1.1, 1.2, etc. that are relative to this topic. So please like and subscribe to the channel, and even better, in the comments, write fretboard escalator or circle of fifths dial, and I'll get back to you and show you how you can get one of those. So like and subscribe to the channel. I hope you found that useful. I'm going to keep posting. So I hope you found that video useful, and I'm going to